all the people who lost their lives and all the families. I'm blessed and I feel lucky to still be here. My wife's exhausted. She's been battling to keep me alive. I almost died, and I literally thought when I was being hauled away in the ambulance, I truly believed, and so did my wife, that that was the last time that I was going to see my family.
If there is a moment in your life, what moment would you go back?
I would not change one thing.
You would
Never,
not edit it.
no.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chief here, the professional problem solver, coming to you live for another episode of The Overcomers. Wait until you see our new guest today. What an exciting man. One of my best friends, Mr. Sean Kelley. I met him about 10 years ago. I actually drove to St. Louis to meet him in person. We were friends on Facebook for a while before then. And since then, he had changed hundreds of people's lives with his company, the Car Motivators. He is the coach in the car business. And not only amazing guy, pure heart, war veteran, and he had overcome so many challenges. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Sean Kelley. He's going to share how he ran into those challenges. A lot of them were not part of his control, but he would also share the tools and the mindset he used to overcome all these challenges and be the happy man and the man full of joy he is today. Mr. Sean Kelley, welcome.
Hey, what's up, Velko? Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited about this one.
Yes, well, Sean, especially after your recent events during COVID and knowing your story, I always knew that you would be a great guest to our show. Our show is designed to really inspire people who are stuck in some situation in their life, people who are facing challenges and they're lacking faith, they're lacking resources, they're lacking practical tools to get out of the mess. So I try to invite guests that have the capacity to share their experience, because it does take a vulnerability to go in the dungeon and share the darkness, and it does take some grace to share what worked for you. So I know that you are full of both of those, and I know that this will be an amazing conversation, and we'll give you a chance to just share with us your life story. Per tradition, we start with the first question, which is share with us. Obviously, we can tell by your last name you're Irish. We haven't seen you drunk in the morning in situations at bars, so we don't know how Irish you really are. We don't know how your right hook looks like. But I know you went to the military, so you definitely had an opportunity to prove yourself preparing for war. And I don't want to share too much, but let's start with tell us about your upbringing. Sean Kelley, who are your parents and who are your grandparents? Because I believe that there's a ripple effect. I think that our grandparents, our ancestors start making small moves, small changes in their life, and the ripple effect continues on with our parents, and then our parents are brave a couple of times in their life, and because of that, we get to going on further. So share with us a little bit about your upbringing.
Sure. And I'll start off by saying I just finished a 6-month alcohol fast. So I'm not a very good Irishman right now, but I will tell you that just got done literally
For
last
Irishmen
weekend.
not to drink, that's really unacceptable.
Whoa, easy there, buddy. I just said a 6-month alcohol fast. I didn't say I don't drink forever. All right, buddy.
Okay.
I'm back on the horse as of last weekend, but it was a plan. It was a planned thing. I wanted to let my liver heal up. It's important to do that every now and then. But anyway, so parents' upbringing. Falco, thank you for asking, and I'll give you guys a little bit about my family history. And I do agree with the ripple effect that you referred to. They say a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can make a hurricane. And I've seen that time and time again in life, how all these little things just lead to massive change in the future. So yeah, growing up, grew up extremely poor, bottom line, I had parents who came from a broken home. My parents divorced. My mom is probably one of the most positive people that you could ever meet on the face of the earth. She's loving and positive and caring and spiritual. My father was a dreamer. He had a great sense of humor. He was one of the few people I ever meet that's taller than me. I'm 6'4", he was 6'7". Yes, but my dad couldn't hold down a job, and he had severe sleep apnea. Back then, there wasn't treatments for it, so as a result, he was exhausted all day. He would sleep most of the day. He would, and ultimately couldn't hold down a job. So
he drink a lot of coffee.
He did drink a ton of coffee.
Okay.
Yes, 2 pots a day. I'm not exaggerating. 2 to 3 pots a day.
That's why you sleep.
Right. Well, I agree. There's all sorts of other reasons, I'm sure, but he was also he was obsessed with astronomy. There isn't a star in the sky he couldn't name. I mean, literally, he had shelves of astronomy maps. We would be up, we would be up all hours of the night observing stars. But I heard time and time again, the reason why your dad can't hold down a marriage is because he won't hold down a job. And so I was brainwashed as a kid to believe that work is what keeps your family together, right? So that's where I believe my insanely psychopathic work ethic comes from. I hate to say it, but on the other side of it, I had, so I had a stepdad who was a Marine, and he taught me discipline. I had a stepmom who worked her butt off to support her family on an $8 an hour salary, and there was 6 kids. I had 2 Korean stepsisters that were adopted, a half sister on my dad's side with my stepmom, a half brother on my dad's side with his ex before my time, so an older half brother, and yes. And also my mother had some serious mental disorders growing up. She had dissociative personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and manic depression. And she spent about 2 years of my childhood. She was in an institution, and so I got to live with my grandma during that time. And my grandma was a phenomenal woman, strong in faith. Made sure we made it to church every Sunday. Made sure we were baptized. My grandma, she worked during World War II. She worked in a bullet factory, making bullets for the soldiers. She lost her hearing, so she was pretty much deaf. But my grandma was an amazing cook. She would throw these phenomenal Thanksgiving dinners and cook for 40 people, and it was amazing. And then on the other side, my grandfather, and this is, my grandfather was in the Navy. He actually jumped off the Lexington during World War II, and it was sunk by Japanese torpedoes. And he used to tell me stories. He lied about his age to get in the Navy. And whenever he saved soldiers, a couple sailors from drowning, and he got a very high level award in the Navy. And he would tell me these stories as a kid, and that's what made me want to join the military. And then my grandma Sylvia, who was married to him, she was absolutely just devoted herself to her husband. She was the ideal wife you would want. And she was, as soon as my grandfather passed away, she went within a few days. She was perfectly healthy, and she went within a few weeks after that. Because she died with him. So her devotion to him was inspiring to me and beautiful. And anyway, that's kind of how I grew up. And so a lot of chaos, a lot of struggle, a lot of financial challenges. It wasn't uncommon for us to have our electric shut off for a week or so at a time. And bottom line, we even had to stay in a few homeless shelters sometimes whenever we would lose our home. So moved around a lot. I went to 4 or 5 different schools growing up, before 5th grade, but finally found some sense of normalcy. My parents started a business, a picture framing business. That's what my stepmother did. That went under within about 2 years. So that was a struggle. So I got to see a lot of failure throughout life.
Wow, Sean. First impression, if I judge your appearance, I would have never guessed that you went through this struggle. You look like such a clean-cut man.
Thank you.
So you've definitely came above all that, and all these challenges made you stronger. Did you have an experience with the grandparents of the step-parents? Of the parents of the step-parents? Did you have like 8 grandparents now?
I did. Yeah, my step-parents, yes. They would, in fact, we would have Easter at my stepmother's mom's house, and then my step-grandma on her side. And then we would actually, on my stepdad's, we would do some 4th of July fireworks and barbecue sort of stuff. So yes, not too much, but.
Have you ever had events where you combine both sets of families Just like, did your parents co-parent well or not really? They didn't really.
Oh no, it was toxic, very toxic. My mother did a better job than my dad, but my dad harbored a lot of resentments, and dare I say, he would almost weaponize us against them. And yeah, so I know I would say there was a lot of them. Each parent would be telling us, the kids, my brother and I, what the other one was, screwing up and why they sucked as a spouse and as a
Right.
parent. And so no, there was a lot of that. And at one point, I actually got into a physical altercation with my father, which led me to move in with my mom when I was a junior in high school. And it started from some stuff he was saying about my mom, actually. So
Yeah.
definitely
Oh,
not good co-parenting.
got it. And you had total of how many siblings? Because you went so fast, I couldn't keep up with you.
3 brothers and 3 sisters in total.
3 brothers and 3 sisters, of which biological brothers and sisters, or you don't make a difference.
So I have a full brother named Brandon. Then I have a half brother. My dad's side, I got a half sister on my dad's side. 2 Korean stepsisters that were adopted that came with my stepmother, and I'm forgetting someone, but that's
And I know that
half brother on my mom's side. Sorry.
there's a ton of emotional trauma, ton of opportunities for emotional trauma for all these kids. And many children, it's really only 2 ways to go. It will either make you stronger, or you would use it as an excuse for the rest of your life, and it will make you a victim. So without naming anyone, were there any of the siblings that actually got hurt during those times and are still recovering today?
Yes, and I do agree. It's like the same sun that melts wax hardens clay.
Right.
And I think some of us became tougher and stronger from it, and others melted. I would say, one of my siblings has had a hard time holding down jobs. And I think a lot of that stems from, the relationship with his dad and his mom and the divorce. And then another one has some depression challenges. And then another one's a little bit reclusive, probably more so fearful about society and things. But for the most part, we're all pretty happy, and all of us have been able to raise a family, and we're all significantly better off now than we were then. So
That's
we've
good.
definitely somehow we've all, even the ones that struggle, we've all risen above the struggle.
That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. And what were the dynamics like? Did you go to live with your mother's mom when your mom went through some of these difficulties, or?
No, my father's mom, actually. That was, yeah, that was, they were going through the divorce, and my dad ended up getting awarded custody because of my mom's mental challenges. So I lived with my father and his mother.
But you described her as the most positive person you've ever
My mom.
experienced in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She actually, about a year before, and it's kind of ironic, right? Because a year before I was born, she actually jumped off a bridge here in St. Louis, tried to kill herself, failed to kill herself, luckily, or we wouldn't be talking right now. Yeah, and my kids wouldn't exist. It's a lot. There's that ripple effect, right? You talked about.
Right.
But when you think about that, so I would say she's by far the most positive person that you could ever meet. She makes me look like a Debbie Downer.
That's awesome. And you are one of the most positive people I know, and I would
Thank you.
describe you as a positive person. So I'm excited that she had such an impact in your life. I had not a similar situation at all, but my dad was not super positive all the time when I was growing up, but my mom always was. So she had kind of taught me how to love unconditionally, how to prioritize relationships, and it might have been your secret ingredient for surviving. This unconditional love, this selfless love that you experienced from your mom could have been why you had a little bit different perspective and you had hope in your heart to keep fighting. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with everything she had gone through, and the mental anguish she was going through, and for her still to be going to battle for us, her kids, and making sure we had clothes and a roof over our head. I mean, it was pretty, no doubt. And she would never, no matter what she was going through with the men she would date, or my father or my stepdad, no matter what she was going through inside her head, she never took it out on us as kids. So she has this deep unconditional love for us. And she would always, no matter how hard of a struggle she was going through, she would never, we would see it, we would hear it, right? We would experience it, but she would never communicate fear to us. She always would talk about the positives and tell us, she would always talk about, I've got $100 coming next week and we're going to have all this money. And you're a kid, you're like, $100. Whoa, we're going to be on Easy Street, right? Now in retrospect, I'm like, man, that's not, and then she would still buy us a toy at Walgreens. How about that?
This is, it's a great skill to be able to not pass on that low energy to your children. It's an amazing skill. And then most parents struggle with that. And those are like the moments where you break a spirit. That's why I'm really committed now about choosing my circle of friends and choosing the people I work with and my clients, because that energy could be passed on from someone else, and then you bring it home and you pass it on to your children, and it's not their fault. Like, they're just kids. So it's an incredible skill that she had, whether she developed it or it was just naturally given to her. But that's something that I value most in parents. There's a movie, I think it's with Roberto Benigni, Wonderful Life or something like that. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about a father and a son, and they go to one of those camps, Nazi camps in Italy, and he is basically there for months, 6-7 months, and his son doesn't even realize that he's at a camp, that they're going to be burned soon. And it's just such an incredible skill. He's always playful with his kid. He could never tell that they're actually in prison. I was like, man, if I have that skill, or if I can learn how to be that, that's the most precious skill. Not to pass on that energy to your kids, not to pass on fear, because parents pass on fear to children. Children are born so pure. So
you know what? I'll call that. I also feel like that, for every strength, there's a downside too, right? There's like a weakness to every strength and vice versa. And I think that and I'm sharing this from, vulnerability and experience to say that the downside to that, right, is, I spent the vast majority of my adult life, I'd say up to the last 7-8 years, everything must be happy and always be positive. And, and I managed that way when I had my own dealership, and I treated my family that way, and I avoided anything negative. So one thing that I've found just over the last, again, 7-8 years or so, as I've grown in faith and leadership, is I'd say, I've gotten comfortable being vulnerable to say, man, I am hurting right now, and I am struggling right now, and I'm really stressed out. And being able to share that with because everything in life isn't always happy and perfect, and to try to sweep pain under the rug. And so really allowing my kids to see that, like, I do fail and struggle and become sad and depressed, and that's normal. It's part of life, and acceptance is the first way to heal that. And how can you accept it if you're in denial of it? So I think that's where you got to watch out for the other end of that spectrum, right? Where everything's too happy and perfect. And then you show your kids how you cope, and then you show them that how you've gotten out of that, and then they can learn those skills that way. But if everything's always happy and perfect, they don't get to learn from you.
In this case, I'm doing well, because I've been honest with my daughter since the very beginning, and we've came up with a commitment, with agreement of truth and grace. So we always say to each other the truth without the twist and without minimization, and we forgive each other. So many times, I remember when I felt pain or sadness or struggle, I would just tell my daughter that I'm tired. And she would see me sometimes angry or struggling with something. Like, Dad, are you tired? So that was like a little keyword, if you may. But I felt like I always needed to put on that happy face, or just a face of hope. If it doesn't have to be a happy face, you could still be tired, you could still be angry, you could still be in pain, but have that little smirk of hope. It's so critical, right?
Hope is everything, man. Absolutely.
Tell me about the first moment where you realized you are alive, that you are a human being, like the first conscious moment you remember from your life.
Man, that is tough. And it's, if I think way back when to where, the first kind,
All the way back.
All the way back. I was in my backyard, and we had a house. We were renting. My dad and my mom were still together, and we were living in St. Louis, Missouri, in the Del Mar area. It probably doesn't mean a lot to most people watching this, but so decent neighborhood for a while. I was probably 5 years old, maybe around that time. And my dad he loved art, photography, astronomy stuff. He had a really nice camera, and anyway, I just remember I had these weird cowboy boots, and and we went in the backyard, and it was a beautiful day. And I remember my dad just taking all sorts of pictures of me, just, goofing off and being a kid. And and how he told me he was going to teach me how to develop the film and how exciting that was. And he was teaching me how, the light interacted with the camera and how it went through the lens and projected, and how that you could develop it into a picture. And it's one of my earliest memories, and it's a very fond one.
That's awesome. What is the life look like from 5 to 10? Challenges must have started. When did they separate?
Yeah, I was about 7, 8. I was about 8 years old when they started really battling. And I think close to 10 is whenever they got the divorce. And my mom, that's when she was institutionalized, about that time frame. And then, that's where we're changing schools a lot and things like that. And then, yeah, about 10 years old, my mom, I guess 10 or 11 or so, she gets out of the institution and she's better, and a lot better anyways, and properly medicated and things like that. And then she develops lymphoma cancer. So from that point on, my mother's battling cancer, and my father's jobless, and my grandma's kind of raising us. And then at some point during that battle, my dad met my stepmom. It was on a personals ad in like a newspaper. Is how they met. That was way before like plentyoffish.com and Tinder. Literally they did so that my mom or my dad met my stepmom on a newspaper Facebook ad, and then they ended up dating and getting married. So then we moved again, and that's when my brothers and sisters, my family grew significantly.
People were doing that in newspaper ads. Hey, I'm looking for a partner.
Isn't that crazy? Do you remember those days? Are you old enough to remember those days?
I don't remember.
Okay, all right.
I still remember a little bit of the times where you go out and you feel a spark and you're like, I like this girl. And then you approach. I remember some of those, but now like 90% of all relationships started on Tinder or Plenty of Fish or whatever. Not to give this apps. I think these apps actually ruin relationships because of so many options. You're swiping left and right. It's actually damaging for finding a genuine connection. But 10 to 15 now, you're a teenager, you're going to school, you're changing different schools. Did you have any strong friendships during those times, or did you struggle connecting with someone for a long period because you always had to move? I know with separated parents, and my daughter had to go through this, it's sometimes the biggest struggle. Sometimes she would be like, I just want to be grounded. I just want to stay somewhere for a few years and stop moving around, And did you have that as well? Did you have that struggle, or did you have some solid friends that stayed with you throughout your entire teenage experience?
No, I struggled with it. When you would never guess this about me unless you've read one of my books. One of my books, I kind of talk about this at length, but I'm very socially awkward, and I get social anxiety. I wouldn't say I'm socially awkward. One of my coaching clients said, "You are a god of extroversion." I'm like, okay, man, whatever. But isn't that hilarious? I'm like, first off, blasphemy, brother. But number two, definitely not. But inside, like I've always had a lot of social anxiety. So that's prevented me from,
We all do, by the way.
I think that's fair to say. I think everyone has some degree of it. But I know because of the moving around, I change friends every couple of years. I'd get like one really close friend, then change schools, and and then lose touch with them after a while. That happened all the way up through high school, really.
Yeah, that's really painful for a kid, because our friends are our world in that age. And obviously graduated high school. And when did you decide to join the military, or was it more influenced from your stepdad, or was it a choice? Sean, you either go to the military or you go get a job. How did that came along?
I decided, and the cool part about Facebook and the technology we have today, right, is I have been able to keep in touch and stay friends with a lot of my friends from high school. We stay in touch, which is awesome. And my Army friends, we're still in touch. I have a party at my house every year for my entire Army unit. We get together and swim and have fun. To answer your question, I knew when my grandpa was telling me those war stories, I was like, I want to do. I just remember thinking, I want to do something for our country. I want to do something for America, and like my grandpa did. And so the first recruiter to find me was going to get me to sign. So the first recruiter that found me was the Army recruiter. And I ended up, and my stepdad said I needed to join the military. He said it would teach me discipline. And I was definitely a little bit of a party animal in high school and a goof off. And my father actually joined the Navy and got kicked out pretty quick. So, my grandma would talk about how he couldn't do it and all that. So I was going to prove that I could, so there was a lot of reasons I wanted to join. And I did. So the Army recruiter found me. I joined at 17 and a half. My dad tried to deny. My dad had to sign off too. Both parents, when you're a minor, had to agree to letting you in. And my dad fought me on it. Like, he didn't want me to join, but I talked him into it. And then So yeah, I ended up joining at 17 and a half, and I was going to join no matter what.
A lot of people don't realize that signing that dotted line means you're actually agreeing to give your life to America, that you could die. There's a big chance, there's a risk in case war happens. That's what the signature means, right?
Yeah, the word GI literally means government issue. Like you are now literally your body is
We own
government property. Yes, yes, the
do what
taxpayer.
you want to do. Yeah. So tell us about your experience in the military. How was the first day like?
Well, it was pretty terrifying. First off, I was excited to be there, and like we have this. So we get to the basic training area, and I'm like got this big grin on my face, and I'm smiling from ear to ear. And the captain picks me out in the crowd, and he's like, "You, why are you smiling?" Next thing you know, the drill sergeants are on me, and then we go up to they're like, "Get up to your rooms," and we run up to our rooms, and everyone's grabbing their duffel bags, right? Well, someone took mine, so I get up to the rooms, like, "All right, everyone, change into your PT gear, your workout clothes," and I didn't have my PT gear, like. Someone took mine. So all the drill sergeants attacked me. And so everyone, for like the first 4 days of basic training, it was like I was the target and they were all coming at me. And all I would do is just freeze and sweat, like literally sweat's just pouring. And they're surrounding you and yelling you. And like finally, after like day 4, I get my bag and I could change clothes. And then from there on, it was smooth sailing. But I had other soldiers in the platoon coming up to me going, "Man, I feel so bad for you. Like, this is so sad." Like, but they're like, "But thanks for taking the brunt of it." So yeah, good times.
You just took it without smiling this time, huh?
Yeah. No, it was like this. And my drill sergeant was a Tampa Bay Buccaneer linebacker. The guy was ginormous. So like next to my dad, he was the only person I think I've met taller than my dad. He was like 7 foot.
Wow.
This guy, massive dude, terrifying.
It's intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long were you in the military? And did you actually go to war or?
Yeah, I was in 6 years, maybe 6.5. So I volunteered. I wanted to be deployed, so I volunteered. I kept trying to get sent overseas. I ended up going to Bosnia, and I was in special operations, so there were opportunities to be deployed. So I got sent to Bosnia shortly after the war had wrapped up, and did a 7-month peacekeeping operation there, and then 9/11 happened shortly thereafter. And then I got put on
a little bit of my back of the woods there. Bosnia is close to Bulgaria. You know how my people are. A little.
Love it over there. It was so fun. I actually really did it. The people, that's what I found is like people are pretty awesome in most countries, even the third world ones. But I go to your people are great, man. The European friends. But I go to then the stop loss because 9/11. I get sent to Iraq. The war in Iraq. So I spent 14 months in combat in Iraq. We actually crossed the border a couple days before the war started. My 3-man team was attached to the 101st Airborne, and we did some work with Delta Force, CIA. Really interesting being a special. Have you ever seen the movie Three Kings with Ice Cube?
Yeah.
So we were civil affairs. We're PSYOP. We're like so civil affairs does the humanitarian efforts. PSYOP does the influential efforts, trying to win the hearts and minds of the people, influence the target audience, and get them to surrender instead of fight. We get to do all that. So it really is like the movie Three Kings.
The influencers.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, during that time I was playing Delta Force video game while you were there on the field doing it for real. So how was the experience? I know you have so many amazing, beautiful stories, war stories, and one that comes to mind that you've shared with me was about a kid that was that in Iraq, where you built friendship with a local kid that actually you brought back to the States, or he came to the States. And can you share that story? That's such an amazing story.
Yes, and by the way, for the record, by the way, Velko, may I shamelessly plug my book real quick?
Sure.
My new book. So and by the way, I don't have the hard copy because it's literally being published today officially. But it's Learn to Coach, Learn to Lead, and this book literally. So the very first chapter is the story. So I'm happy to share it. We end up. So we crossed the border a couple days early, and we end up. We're supposed to be posting up in an abandoned military warehouse because there's an enemy battalion, and they wanted us to broadcast surrender appeals before the 101st would roll through, so we could try to prevent as much fighting from happening as possible. So we drive all night. We get to this abandoned military warehouse where we're going to hide out. It's just me and the 12. We get about 12 of us total, and we go to this abandoned military building, and we open the place up. The worst smell in the world hits me in the face, Velko. And turns out it wasn't an abandoned building at all. It was actually an Iraqi jail. There was 175 inmates or so locked up. They hadn't had food or water in almost a week. And they're all they wake up and they're yelling in Arabic and they're freaking out because they don't know if we're there to execute them or free them. And I'm pulling up a picture to show you. And then literally while we're doing, so we're like, we got to get the hell out of here. Our position's going to be compromised. As we're leaving the building, hear this in perfect English, like a little boy's voice, and he was like, "Hey man, get me the hell out of here." And I'm like, no, I'm hallucinating. Like I haven't slept in 3 days, whatever. But then I hear it again, and the Iraqis stopped yelling in Arabic. So we had security on the enemy forces, and we hadn't been discovered, so our position wasn't compromised yet. We go back in, and and all the Iraqis are pointing at this little boy. They're like pointing at him. And this special forces sergeant with us, he's like, boy, if you can understand what the beep I'm saying, I'll get you the beep out of here. And the boy looks up and he goes, I understand you say a lot of bad words, sir. And I'm like, this guy's right. So we end up freeing this kid. He ends up being our interpreter the whole time we're in Iraq. And and here's a picture of that's a picture of my team and I in Iraq. There's me right there. I'm not quite hard to see it, sorry, but anyway, so we free him. He's our interpreter the whole time we're in Iraq, and then he ends up working for General Petraeus after we left Iraq. And General Petraeus and him ended up. He did such a good job for General Petraeus. General Petraeus brought him back to America, and he spent a year in the desert teaching teaching Marines how to survive when they go to Iraq. And then he ends up, and then when he gets done in the desert over there, I invited him to come to St. Louis, and I hired him and made him a car salesperson at my dealership. So that's him and I, him and I at the dealership. And and now to this day, so I don't know if I should say this publicly.
I'm getting goosebumps from this story every time I hear it because it's such a beautiful story.
Well, and now you know, and Velko, you know what's crazy? So now he's in the FBI. How about that? I don't know if I should say that.
He's in the FBI. You're well connected. I'm going to be careful now.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of job he does there, but I don't think it's that. I don't think he's an assassin. Anyways.
How did he get from the car dealership to the FBI?
Persistence, right? His ability to be multilingual, his past work with the government in Iraq and the accolades and things he achieved there. So I think he built a brand around his ability to, help America. And he sold that, and then he used that to close, and he used the sales skills I taught him at the dealership to close the FBI. How about that?
Good. I like that. All right, so you came back, and I also know the story of how you got the job at the dealership. That's also a beautiful story, and I think all of your humble beginnings are allowing you to see the opportunity almost as an immigrant, because that's how immigrants see that opportunity. Like when I heard about the opportunity to sell cars, I was like, are you telling me that I can wear a suit every day and I can just talk to people and make these big commissions? And I was sold. I was like, I will never lose that job. So I feel that this is a huge part of success in the industry, just not taking it for granted and just understanding the amazing opportunities that this business offers. So share with us, how did you end up working at a dealership?
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. It's like gratitude for an opportunity will take you very far in life. I totally agree with that. And I did. That's exactly how I felt, because I was in such a bad place in my life, right? So I'll explain. I got out of the Army. I had, I was uneducated, and literally, parents didn't teach me about finances. You know who my parents were at this point. So I didn't really learn about that sort of thing. So I took all the money I made in combat that I'd saved up, put it down on a house on an ARM loan, adjustable rate mortgage at the time. And then, went out and bought a car and bought my fiance a really nice engagement ring. Then everything, battling to pay, trying to work part-time at Best Buy, making $10 an hour while going to school, but I was behind on all my bills. Literally, my fiance's ring was out for repo. I was just struggling financially, and I'd blown my savings, and my mortgage doubled. And then literally I'm trying to find a new job. I'm walking into an interview at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I had an opportunity to get a job making $28,000 a year monitoring the servers at their corporate headquarters. And as I'm walking in, I'm ready to do this interview. All of a sudden I get a call from Monica, my fiance at the time, and she's in tears. She's like, what are we going to do? I'm pregnant. My life's over. So like literally I go in the interview, Velko, I'm probably sitting there like this the whole time. Like needless to say, I didn't get the job. And then I'm driving to work the next day. I wreck my car, and now I'm like, oh my God, no problem. I'll just go get financed. And I go to like 3 dealerships, and one place even was like, you can only afford a $30 a month payment. Get the hell out of here. And it was horrible. And I'm embarrassed. This is in front of my pregnant fiance. I'm like, if I don't even have a car, how am I going to get to work? And then I walk the 3rd dealership. Is the finance manager gets me approved, and he educated me on the credit situation and how I could improve it. And he says, Sean, you should sell cars. And I'm like, what do you make? And he's like, well, a bad month you'll make $3,000, and a good month you'll make 10. I was like, man, I was getting paid $3,000 to get shot at in Iraq. And I was like, I get to go home at night. This is awesome. And all the while in my head, all I was thinking, Velko, was like, if someone would just give me a chance, I will pour everything I am, and I will give them massive effort just to be as good as I can be. So when they gave me that opportunity, I did. I went all in right out of the gate. I just poured myself into the business. I listened to everything my manager taught me, and luckily I had great managers who were really skilled, because I was like their robot. Whatever they'd tell me, I would do it times 5. And that led me to becoming one of the top salespeople in my dealer group. And my manager respected the way I listened to him so much that he decided to mentor me, and he brought me up under him. And when he left the dealership, he asked that they give me the position, and I was able to replace him. So 27 years old, I got my own store, man.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So being a good obedient student makes you a good obedient leader.
Fact. Great point.
And if you have to rate your challenges based on severity or based on coming close to giving up, what are your biggest challenges? I know that after that, at some point we met, I drove to St. Louis because why did I drive to St. Louis, remember?
Yes, because I wanted to build a people development. I wanted to start a coaching practice, and I wanted to transition from the dealership to that. And I was trying to do that, and I knew putting myself out there was going to be a requirement. But again, my social awkwardness and comfort zone. And so I needed your help to get me to go live on Facebook. Every time I would go, no, Velko, I need you to come to St. Louis and freaking make me go live over and over and over. And then you did it. From there, I was comfortable. And here we are now.
And you were so natural on your first live. You were like an anchor.
You led the way, brother. You did most of the talking. You made it easy for me, just like you're doing here.
But look, it's incredible how you're not afraid to die and go to war and deal with so much risk, but you're afraid, or not anymore, but you were afraid of this little plastic thing. And then what will people say, right? That's the other fear that we have. And, I have a completely different opinion about introverts, and I hope I don't sound harsh, but I think that it's a selfish thing to be an introvert. It's being a self-centered. It's being like, oh, I'm afraid. I don't want to do it. And like I said, I've gone through this too. I'm an introvert too. Everybody is an introvert. It's just some people cross that line and some people don't. But I think it's a selfish thing not to. It's a selfish thing not to share your gift with the world. And if the cost is being a little embarrassed, if the cost is getting some criticism from people who are still afraid to do it, and let's pay the cost and let's see where it takes us. And look at you now, years, probably 8, 9, 10 years after this, you run your successful business, you're coaching people how to do exactly the same thing, and you're helping them to cross that line of doubt and unjustified fear, right? And I know that you had another challenge that happened during COVID, and that's probably the biggest challenge you faced in your life, right? Because you were so close to dying, probably the closest in your life. So do you want to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. And I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
So taking over, running the dealership, and we'll go through to that point.
Yes. Go ahead.
So taking over the store. So I'm 27 years old. I'm managing like pretty much every, manager out there. I'm selling. If I'm not getting my way enough, or yelling to get my point across, I'm working like a workaholic psycho that I am. I'm ignoring my wife. I'm ignoring my son at home and letting her, do what she does. And of course, at this point, I'm just trying to get caught up on bills and get, a foundation under me. But I would say that, because of the way I grew up, I ended up, carrying this workaholism into my adult. And it really created a big rift between my wife and myself. So then the economy tanks in 08, 09. And so I'm trying to struggle there. I was able to keep the dealership afloat and keep my job through that, thankfully. But all the while, just by doing it, everything I would always do was to work harder and do more work and spend more time at the dealership. My friends, if there was one thing I could share with you is don't destroy the rest of your life for one part of your life, such as your job, or don't destroy your job for your family. I'm saying be centered and healthy across all of it. And that's what I've learned from all this is through all the struggle is that you're one person. Everyone talks about work-life balance and, hang your problems on the door when you come to the office. No, you're you, whether you're at the office or at home. And it's not work-life, it's just life, right? So find a way to be centered and healthy across all those avenues. But you have to look inward and say, where do I need to be better? Where can I work smarter instead of working harder? And what are my values? Who am I? And which values am I compromising each and every day? And we really start asking yourself those tough questions and looking into the, like you said earlier, the abyss, the darkness within you, and then ask yourself, like, how am I screwing up my life? What am I doing that is messing up my life? And what am I doing that's against my values? You can really start realizing where you need to grow and improve. And those types of questions led me to learning to coach, learning to ask questions and listen and empower people, rather than being the super salesman who has to work all these hours and at my dealership, because I disempowered people for so long. So anyways, I learned to coach. I started my own business. And now I've got a whole team of coaches. We work with dealers coast to coast, and just blessed to do what I do. And there's still struggles, but yes, I about a year and a half ago, and God, I pray for all the people who lost their lives and all the families. I'm blessed, and I feel lucky to still be here. So many people have had it, everything, like COVID worse than me, youth challenges worse than me. I know that's one of the keys to my positive attitude, Velko, is I feel like someone always has it worse than you. And when you remember that, then what you're going through doesn't seem as bad. But yes, I had a really bad bout of COVID, and it was Friday, December 3rd, 2021, and literally just about a year and 10 months ago, and I came down with a fever, and 2 weeks I was just, I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get better. Next week I'll get back to work, and I couldn't even lift my arms. I couldn't get out of bed. About 2 weeks into the sickness, my wife's exhausted. She's been battling to keep me alive, and I'm talking about battling. She did amazing. She stepped up. It was amazing how God empowered her to take care of her family when we were going through this. But yeah, I ended up being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance and almost died, and stayed at the hospital. Oh yeah, it was probably one of the. It was definitely a scary time. I literally thought when I was being hauled away in the ambulance, I truly believed, and so did my wife, that was the last time that I was going to see my family. So that was definitely a struggle. And then from there, having a company, having a bunch of clients and people and employees, and literally knowing that at that point, I was doing 80% of the customer fulfillment. And Velko, I'm telling you right now, none of that mattered to me when I was on my deathbed. Money didn't matter. The company, all that mattered was the prayers I was getting. And that, the feedback, when people heard, and we didn't tell anyone, my wife posted, the day I went to the hospital, my wife posted, pray for my husband. I felt every one of those prayers, brother. I mean, literally, I had the most powerful near-death experience. I felt a dear friend of mine, Brittany Hibden, who had passed away from, we believe, COVID pneumonia 3 months prior to this, literally came to me in the emergency room at the hospital and reached into my chest and told me I was going to be okay. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in weeks, I felt warm, and I knew I was going to survive. And then I end up, so my team took charge of the company. Literally, one of them a few weeks before I got sick was like, Sean, what we do if something happened to you? We need a process for handling crisis. So I made one for him. I was like, all right, let's come up with some. So we made one. I was like, we'll never need this. Brother, that was a God thing, right? They followed that process. They contacted every client. They took on the project work. Every one of my clients supported me. I was out of work for 4 months, and my company didn't skip a beat. God kept me on this earth, and I knew that I was supposed to deliver a message. And I wrote The Visitor, and all proceeds from this book have gone to nonprofit. And this book is literally The Visitor: How a Near-Death COVID Experience Taught One Man faith, prayer, love, and charity are God's remedies to survive and thrive. I used to like in church, they'd be like, we need to pray. And I'd always think to myself, well, we need to do something. We need to take action. Prayer isn't enough. I'm telling you right now, through that experience, I heard everyone's prayers. I didn't even know they knew, but I was hearing them when I would close my eyes, I would see them. When I would try to sleep, I would hear them praying for me, people I knew. And when I woke up, I've never felt so joyous. And so my body was broken and my heart was filled with love and happiness and joy. And I've never felt so powerful and so physically weak at the same time. I couldn't even lift my arms. I literally, Velko, was crapping on myself in my bed, and the nurses, and at first I'd fight it, and the nurses would tell me, we're here to help you. And that I learned to ask. There's a time to help others, and there's a time to accept help. And I think, like a lot of us with our pride, we are embarrassed and prideful to ask for help. And we need to be open about that. We need to be vulnerable. We need to say, hey, I'm jacked up right now and I need another human to pull me out of this crap. Whether it's something in your marriage, or whether it's a health issue, or whether it's financial, like, people will help you if you give them the chance to.
Yeah, prayers God encourages us to pray, which stands for praise. P stands for praise. R stands for repent. A stands for I don't remember. And Y stands for yield, which means wait. But I remember the A. I heard that before. Prayers matter. Prayers matter so much because it's basically the energy of love being transferred to you. You know, there's a spiritual realm that we can't see in the natural, but it's an actual power. It's an actual energy. You get my love, and I get to give it to you, and it's just incredible. So what did you try any medication at that time at home? Like some of the ones that were working, nothing was working. What was wrong?
First thing wrong with me was COVID. Second thing was pride. I did not. I was telling my wife, I don't have COVID. I have the flu. And she's like, you need to take a COVID test. No, I don't. I'm fine. It's just I have 104 fever. You don't get a fever. Did you?
Yeah,
okay.
I was in denial for like a week and a half, and then I kept coming to the office, and I had people I'm working with, and I'm like, I'll hide to sneeze, and I'll hide to cough, and they're like, are you sure you don't have COVID? And like literally everybody got COVID from me because of my pride and denial. And at some point I went home, and I just stayed home for 2 weeks. It was tough.
Brutal, man.
I think I had a couple of times. I still don't have my sense of smell. I kind of lost it, and it's probably 30% right now. I still don't smell everything right.
Really? I know a lot of it. A couple of my employees say that they cannot smell a thing. And to your point, it's like, so about 6 or 7 days in, my wife demands that I go to urgent care. So we go to urgent care, and they're like, listen to my chest, and the doctor turns ghost white, and he's like, man, I don't hear any air going in and out of your lungs. And they do an x-ray, and he's like, you have severe COVID pneumonia. I don't think I've ever seen anyone have it this bad this fast in 6 days. So anyway, at that point, my wife gets me these oxygen condensers at home that produce oxygen, and they're blowing air. She gets me, I took every medicine from day 6 on, Velko. I took every possible medicine I could get my hands on. But it was 6 days in, it was almost too late. I mean, literally almost too late. But the doctor said that my wife's decisive action is what saved my life, because True. At least kept me going that long. And so, I took all the things. I mean, oxy, whatever it was called. Hydrochloroquine, ivermectin, everything. I had one of those infusions. I forget what they're called now. The antibody, monoclonal antibody infusion.
You tried everything and nothing worked, huh?
Nothing worked, brother. Prayer was what it took. It was literally prayer. I get to the hospital, and of course they put me on steroids there, and everything there. What was that stuff that they remdesivir? Was on remdesivir. I was on the oxygen, the whole thing, man, forever.
Oh, I remember what the A for. P is praise, R is repent, A is ask, and Y is yield.
Ask. So, I was about to suggest ask, but I didn't want
to ask. Exactly. But you gotta ask. And I'm so glad you're alive, and I'm so glad you're gonna continue to make a difference in our lives.
As long as God lets me be here with you, brother. As long as He lets me stay here, I will. You have my word.
That's awesome. And did you have, since I know that I had a near-death experience, I survived an accident miraculously, and the car was completely destroyed, and I had not even a scratch on my body, not even a stain on my clothes. So as soon as I came out of the car, I was convinced 1,000,000% this was God. There was even my dad, who wasn't a believer at the time. He came to pick me up, and he was like, God exists, which is basically the truth. And we were sold by His mercy. And I know that I've changed so much. Everything in my life changed since that moment. I did a Facebook Live video right away, and I was like, hey, we are alive. Do you guys realize how close we are to death? We're like 1 millimeter away from death, and it's only by His grace and mercy we are still alive and breathing. And I remember encouraging people as a practical tool every time when they look at their watch, when they look at what time it is, to just thank God for still being alive for another hour, for another day, another second, another minute, because it is a precious opportunity to be alive, and it's not up to us completely. Even when you try everything, all the medications, doctors are powerless, it's all up to His mercy. And I'm so glad that you're sharing your book with us. Where can people buy the book? Amazon, I would assume?
Yes. The Visitor and Learn to Coach, Learn to Lead are both on Amazon. Learn to Coach, Learn to Lead will be on Amazon within the next 48 hours. You'll be able to pick it up there, but The Visitor, you can pick it up if you want on Amazon. If you want to read a story of trauma, faith, and hope, and it is And there's some stuff in there that I think I get some pretty amazing feedback. That book was God was telling me what to write, and I was just his vessel. I mean, seriously, I banged out that book. It's funny, Learn to Coach, Learn to Lead. I've been writing for 5 years. The Visitor I wrote inside of 60 days while laying in my bed and trying to recover while on oxygen after getting out of the hospital. It was done, and how that whole thing, Velko.
You went to work right away while you were in the hospital.
Velko, think about this, man. Think about this. So if I hadn't gone through the divorce and become a workaholic, sorry, my family, my parents, I have not been divorced. If my parents hadn't gone through divorce, I would be a workaholic psycho like I did, and then almost ruined, which caused me to convert and become Catholic, to be on the same page with my wife, which put God into my life, which is who brought me through almost dying of COVID. You see like that's that the ripple effect, man.
Yeah, we rarely think about that, but all of the nasty things that are happening in our life have a role, and they have a significant role for all the moments of joy. So in that sense, I'd like to ask you one of our signature questions. Is there a moment in your life, if there is a moment in your life, what moment would you go back to and relive with the opportunity to edit or just experience one more time? Is there a moment in your life that you want to go back to and just experience one more time? What moment would that be?
Well, first off, I would not change one thing.
You would not edit?
No, I would not edit one thing, man, because again, it's God's plan, not mine, and I'm right where God wants me, right?
You could literally change the exchange between your parents. You could put different words in their mouth, and maybe they don't separate. If you have the power to do that, what would it be?
But what would I relive? I would say I would want to relive that, probably the happiest moment of my life and the saddest moment, the most painful moment of my life. So I would say I would want to relive the moment that I got back from Iraq, embraced my now wife of 18 years, who was back then my girlfriend.
That's the happiest moment.
That's the happiest. I'll never forget how that felt to see her after 14 months of being in combat and just embrace her. So I'd say that would be number one that I'd want to relive. And then I'd want to relive maybe some of the most painful, struggling moments, just so I could see it from the wisdom I have today.
Right. Which would that be? What is the most painful moment?
Man, I would say probably when I chose my business and my selfishness over my wife. I would want to try to better understand my thought process at that point. I would want to see
that a little bit.
Well, when you pick your needs, your wants, and your business over God, number one, and then over your spouse, who you're supposed to be like till death do you part, right? You're supposed to, if you read Ephesians in the Bible, it talks about you're supposed to cherish your wife above all else. Love your wife like she's your own flesh, right? That's what God commands us as men to do. Yeah. I went against that, and I would hold in all the anger and frustration, because again, everything has to be happy and perfect and positive. And I wouldn't tell her when she was hurting me. I wouldn't communicate to her. And that led to this massive rift in my marriage. And it caused me to we almost got a divorce, Velko. So I would want to go back to the pain I was suffering with then, which led me to choose my own selfish needs and my business over my wife. And I would want to relive that moment. Again, I wouldn't want to change anything, because this is how it all ended up. But I would want to just look at myself then and maybe pity myself. Feel sorry for that, Sean, and know that and feel and pity my wife and what I was putting her. I would want to relive that, just so I can make sure I never forget it. Never forget the screw ups I've made. Does that make sense? A lot
of men are watching now, and they're thinking, okay, it's selfish only if you don't share the proceeds, but you are the head of a household, and some people see that as taking responsibility, because you were still paying the bills through the business, or you weren't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was paying the bills, but think about if you choose your job and your own selfish needs of fulfillment and financial fulfillment and money over your family, then it's bar none a sin. And to let that destroy your marriage, and for me to be so damn stubborn to say like, well, this is how it has to be. I can't tell you how many times I would use that bullshit, pardon my French, but that bullshit excuse. This is how it has to be. I've got to pay the bills. I got to work to feed the family. No, it's BS. I would tell myself, Sean, and again, would I change anything? No, because everything's happened exactly how it should. But I would just want to, I would want to be like, Sean, what the hell are you doing, bro? You're not wanting to learn. You're not wanting to get more efficient at your job. You're not wanting to learn to be a better coach, to empower your people, so you don't have to be here for 12-hour days. That's your bullshit excuse. And I would have, does that make sense, Velko?
Yeah, it does make sense. And basically what you're saying is, don't lose the queen while you're building your kingdom.
That's a very said much more eloquently than I did. Nice. I love that. Yes.
Yeah,
Great.
it's what matters the most to me is, faith, family, things like that. So the reason why we're working so hard is so we can protect that unit. So this is a good refresher for everybody that's putting work as the highest priority. And this is the moment that you would like to relive.
hmm
Let's talk a little bit about coaching. What is the most important question you ask leaders? What is your go-to deepest question that you ask leaders?
I think that a lot of us are just kind of drifting through life doing activities, right? We do stuff, we are in this routine and we're just kind of going through the motions and ultimately, being a little complacent. We all get that way from time to time. And I think that when you get someone excited about a purpose, you help them find something that they really want in the long term that they can look forward to accomplish, something that isn't easy to accomplish. It's going to take them some time and effort, and there's going to be a lot of goals to hit along the way. But when you help someone uncover their purpose, you are truly doing the work of God. Because, man, there's a book, you got to check this out, Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. You read it? Okay. So in it, Napoleon Hill is interviewing Satan basically. And Satan, and he asked Satan, how do you lead people to hell? And it gives me chills talking about it, Velko. I got you. So he asked Satan, how do you lead people to hell? And Satan says, well, first off, I do it through their school, parents, teachers, and religious figures. And then he asks them, okay, how do you do it? Through them. And then the Satan says, well, I do it through the religious figures by creating fear. We talked about that earlier, how fear is so damaging. Why would we pass that on to our kids? The devil says, I do it through parents and teachers by robbing people of their ability to think for themselves.
Yes.
Because then when they go to school, they're just, let's memorize facts, right? Mm-hmm. And Einstein said, education is not the memorization of facts, but the training of the mind to think. So what reading this book made me realize as a coach, because I read this book long after I started my company and learned to coach, what it made me realize, because what is coaching? The root word meaning of coach means to help take people where they want to go. But I can't do that for them. I have to ask them questions and help them learn to think and empower. Because what the devil says in the book, in Outwitting the Devil, is that I love it when people can't think for themselves, because then they drift through life without purpose. And when you're just drifting through life, you can easily be influenced by all these outside evil propaganda. So what do I love asking people is 3 years from now, what is your complete and clear vision for success?
3 years.
3 years. Go 3 years out, because then they're going to be like, man, I'd like to be making another $50K a year. I'd like to have a fully motivated, engaged team. I'd like to be spending more time with my wife and family. You get the whole picture, right? Which takes a few more questions.
Yeah.
I'm oversimplifying when I just say that, but bottom line, man, when I ask these questions of people and they start getting excited about the future, and all of a sudden I can see them go from just drifting every day to like purpose. And now they have something to work for that they're excited about. And now as a coach, I can start challenging them when they're getting complacent, when they're off track. I earn now I can help them stay on track. So that's what I would say it is the act of helping people find a purpose and that vision that they're super excited about accomplishing.
How often do you run into people who don't have a clear vision when you ask that question?
98% of the people I get to coach.
And how do you help them design that vision?
The clearer it is, the more likely it is to become a reality, right? So think about this. Everything on this planet is designed first. Everything that's man-made, which is a lot, right? Anyways, is designed first in our minds and then in reality. So the clearer the picture of their vision for success, the better. So it's not about the right questions or the best questions. Sometimes I ask crappy questions, all right? I'm not perfect. I'm still learning to be a better coach every day. But point is, it's asking enough questions to where there's clarity, and it's the whole person's vision. It's the stuff outside of work, the stuff inside of work, the stuff with the relationships, the stuff with their skills. So you ask enough questions, you help build a clear enough picture for them, and when you read it back to them, when you see them get excited and they're like, man, that sounds amazing. Like, I'd love to do that. And then all of a sudden, then you're like, all right, now how would you feel about coming up with a plan to do that? And how would you feel about having your own coach to help you get from here to there? And then you start building the plan and the goal, the benchmarks, right? And help them, understand what obstacles couldn't get in the way. And it's a beautiful thing.
I love Think and Grow Rich. It's a really great book, fundamental in my life. And I usually recommend to people to read Think and Grow Rich and immediately after to read Outwitting the Devil. But I think now that you're talking about it, I think it's probably best to read Outwitting the Devil first so you could prepare for Think and Grow Rich, because there's still limitations if you haven't read that,
Yeah.
to see that everyone struggles with self-doubt, that it's the devil attacking us. So we just need to learn how to protect ourselves. And I feel like if you read the book Outwitting the Devil first, then you have much greater results after Think and Grow Rich, because it's kind of like a roadmap on how to achieve the success you're going after. What do you do now as a parent that will prevent your struggles? And because your kids are not going to go through the same struggles, how can you help them have the same success? You've heard of that story, not story, but they say, tough times create strong men create good times create soft men, or something like that.
Weak people. Yeah.
So how do you make sure that your son also goes through a similar struggle and survives it and has the tolerance and the thick skin to be hopeful, to be faithful, to keep grinding, and one day he could say, "I wouldn't change a thing"? How do you make sure you're not spoiling your kids so they could go through this?
This show's all about being open and honest and vulnerable. So I would say I can definitely improve around that specific arena around spoiling them. There's no doubt. Like one of my values is that I love creating awesome experiences for the people I love. And that includes, taking my trips and doing fun stuff together and spending money together and whatever. And so I could definitely improve on the spoil thing. But that being said, I will be honest with you, man. I think I've learned what not to do from my grandmother and my father's situation. So my grandmother would always bail my dad out and then resent him and yell at him and berate him and make him feel about this tall, right? So I would call it, nowadays, I think they call it emasculating. So I will not ever emasculate my son. I do challenge him, and I do set boundaries, and I do hold him responsible. A case in point right now. I'll give you an example. So I will not bail him out. So
and your daughters as well, not just your son.
Same with my daughters. And here's the thing, like all this stuff, it's funny, about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, Velko, I for some reason I had an epiphany. I'm like, man, I spend so much time pouring into, people I coach.
Yeah.
I'm like, what if I did that with my kids?
I have.
Okay. So like literally now I have every Saturday we do a workshop. I pick one of the topics that I coach managers and business owners on, and I coach my family on it. But also I set boundaries, expectations, and then I will not bail him out. I told my son, I was like, son, so he's in transition right now from high school and he's going to a tech school. He's learning software coding. And I said, if you either have to be going to school full time and working part time, and financially he wouldn't have to work, but to live in my household as an 18-year-old, you got to work. So you're either going to school full time, working part time, or you're working full time and you're waiting to start school, but nothing else in between. Long story short, he hadn't taken on full-time shifts at his job, and he doesn't start school till January. So I'm like, hey bro, so this was like a meeting we had last night. I was like, or about 2 weeks ago, actually, not at this point, but we met again last night. I just gave him a reminder. So I was like, hey, it was August 15th of this last month, and I said, you have 30 days to be working full-time or be in school, and if not, then the car you haven't bought it from me yet, so you'll be done driving that, and you'll have to, and then also your cell phone, I'm paying for your cell phone, you're going to lose your cell phone, then you can be on your own at that point. And then from there, I'll give you 30 more days before I ask to hit the bricks and leave the house. So those are consequences that will happen if he doesn't meet his end of the bargain, or it's not really a bargain, it's my expectation. So you have to, so I guess that's what I'd say is still challenging your kids, giving them expectations and standards, communicating those clearly, right? And positive. I'm not mad at him. I'm not yelling. I'm not emasculating him. I'm just telling him this is what's going to happen, because in real life, there are consequences. And it's funny, our kids have so many friends, right? But they only get two parents. Yeah. So we need to be parents to our kids. And yes, like if I let him go into society like my grandma did with my dad, and the way he would fail and it would be horrible for him. And so I've got to prepare him for that by challenging him and causing him pain and holding him to standards and expectations. And that's what I try to do.
That's beautiful. And have you been preparing him since, in his defense, since 16? Like, hey, dude, once when we hit 18, you're gonna have to do stuff, or it's coming to him right now as a surprise. He's like, no, hey, no. You were cool last week. What's going on, Dad? Like, and what happens if your wife says, we're not gonna send him on the streets? What are you talking about? What happens then?
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. So step one, think about God, family, right? First. Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm starting at the top. So God, then my wife, then my kids. So I won't make a decision without aligning to my wife. And that, let's go back to Ephesians, bow to your significant other in God-fearing reverence. That goes for men and women. So I've got to go to my wife and be on the same page with her. That's rule number one. So we're aligned. So
Okay.
I won't set these expectations without her being on the same page. That's so we're and then no, this is it's definitely a transition, right? As your kids are growing and maturing, you also have to adapt and mature the way you're leading them as a parent. So none of this would be a surprise to my son. We've been telling him about this for several years now, which is great because then he comes to me with things like, okay, how do I pay bills? Are you going to show me that? He'll yes, absolutely. I won't let you fail. And then I teach him how to pay his bill. And then next thing you know, he's paying it on. So it's definitely a process. How about you?
You're still partners. He's just, making his own way.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man.
I followed Tom Hanks' son. I forgot his name, but he's on Instagram. And I've watched him in the past few years just go through his transitions because Tom Hanks has to be one of the best paid actors. He's got so many movies, he's supported by the whole Hollywood clan there. And I'm sure that there's no financial issues on that end, but he went through, he's like tattoos all over his face, his body, self-denial, blaming his dad, going through all this. And now I think after a few years of following him, he's like coming out with the truth, taking responsibility, finally building his own personal, genuine brand. But he had to go through all this pain of being a victim. And then the way he describes his life is like he was always in the shadow of his famous dad. So it's such a struggle to pull your own weight. But he had to go through that. So I could only imagine how, I don't know Tom Hanks and what his intentions are, but I could only imagine how difficult it is for somebody who's a multi-millionaire to do that. But it's necessary. It's so necessary. So preparing, my son is going to be 1 month old on August 3rd. So I'm preparing for now. I want to be there for every conscious moment in his life, and I want to prepare him for that, and I don't want to spoil him because
you're going to make an amazing son. He's going to be an amazing man, brother. If the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, then he'll do just fine.
Man, thank you so much for saying that. When I was a kid and I had to beg my dad for Nikes and stuff like that, and he didn't grow up with a lot of money, so he was very conservative. And I remember telling myself, one day when I'm in your position, I will give everything to my kids. I will just make sure. And now I'm like, that's not a good strategy, because you're creating a monster. And they have to definitely build their own persona and their own identity. And the other thing you mentioned that I struggle with is like, man, I teach so many people, and my daughter is now 12. She could definitely use some of the things that I teach, So we've been doing tradition for Saturdays for many years where we spend time together, but it's a lot of entertainment, And now I like your idea. So instead of having entertainment Saturday and doing
training, Velcro Academy Saturday, yes.
Velcro Academy, get your uniform on and get your pen and paper, because it's critical. And if they learn well from us, they will go out and teach, and they will make a difference in the world. And for their age, it's so rare to see, kids that are teenagers or 18 that have their head on their shoulders. Preparing them is our duty.
Man, I want to double click on a couple of things you just said, so I read an article, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it was about Jackie Chan recently, and it said that he donated $500 million, his entire wealth, to charity. And then so in the interview, they interviewed him about it, and they said, what about your son? He has a son. And then his answer was, if he's capable, he'll be able to earn it himself. That was literally his answer. I was like, wow. And then it made me think of what you were saying. Made me think of there's a book by a guy named Jordan Peterson called 12 Rules for Life. Man, powerful book. One of the things he says in that book about, he's like, if you're a parent and your kid is about to shove a fork in a light outlet, he's like, and you have a 2x4, then it is your duty. You would hit them away from the outlet, right? Which would cause pain to them, but you'd probably save them from dying from electric shock. So he shares that story. And in that, are your kids going to be like, yay, it's Saturday and it's time to learn? No, that's like maybe not as bad as hitting with a 2x4. But point is like, we need to make them struggle. We need to create challenges in their life. And then because no one else is. And if we don't, they're going to go out into society, and how are they going to handle life? Right.
And there's a pattern, people that had disciplined but fair parents are super grateful to them. And people that had parents who spoiled them are blaming them for the rest of their life, for not preparing them for life, for creating. I recently realized that flattering, it's one of the biggest sins you could do. Telling your child that they're 7 when they're actually 3 It's one of the worst things you could do. And some parents think that this is love. You're crippling your child. And I've done it too, and I know that my parents have done it with me and my sister, and this is like a new thing. And as far as the inheritance, my wife and I are on the same page that we are going to give all of our money away before we die, and our kids are not going to get any of it, not even a penny. We have
We'll
to.
go the Jackie Chan route.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an individual walk. I mean, as long as you have survival in your life, the rest of it, abundance, is your responsibility, not mine.
Yeah. It's funny. I met a dealer up in Michigan not too long ago, a car dealer principal. He owns a bunch of stores. And he was talking about how, you can't take your wealth with you. And he's like, so, but yet we nest egg all this money away, and we essentially are like, and then we die and then we leave it to them. But what if you spent that money with your people now while you're alive, with your family, and you just had life and experiences together? And he was wrestling with this, and I think that's what life. I think that's one of the hardest parts about life is like you mentioned earlier, right? It's like living like, if you can't live every day like it's your last day, because that wouldn't be conducive to long-term success. You'll end up impoverished and poor and broken. Right. But yet we need to, in our hearts, feel that way, like it is our last day. And so it's like finding that perfect balance, and that's so hard to do.
Well, it's prepare for another 100 years, but be ready to die today. So while you're ready to die today, you're busy preparing for another 100 years.
It's so hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And children are the biggest blessing we could
I like
have.
the first way you said it. Children's, I loved it. That was great. They're Eastern European there. I love it.
Fishes. Children are the biggest. The fishes. It's a Chicago thing to put S on everything.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But children are such a blessing. Purpose for our life. Hard to find the medium. There is one verse. There's many verses in the Bible, in the Proverbs, that say, "Don't spare the rod. Discipline your children. It's your job." And that's one thing about parenting that my wife and I talk about all the time, because in her experience, she was disciplined with the rod, and I wasn't, and my sister wasn't, but my dad verbally was very critical. So I think that the sweet spot is the way God is parenting us. He gives us the education, and he age appropriately. He gives us the choice to make. And he gives us also the consequences with all the stories in the Bible of what could potentially happen if we make the wrong choice. And that's the parenting approach we're trying to adapt and really practice, where we don't physically hurt them, we don't verbally abuse them, we don't make them feel like they're smaller than the grass, but instead we kind of educate them through stories, through other people's experiences, through our personal experience, and we empower them with the choice to make. And we're there whipping with them, just like God is whipping with us in our own mess, but we led ourselves to that point. So unless we take responsibility, there's no coming out. So what do you think about the rod? Do you spank them a little bit? Do you give them a choices to make, or you make conditions? And which one is easier to follow, the physical consequences, the fear? I always thought this is like a shortcut to control. Like when people run out of ideas, then they have to get into physical altercations. At least that's how it is with adults. But what's your approach with discipline specifically? Obviously, now you've set the terms. Maybe in previous years, before they were 18, you had to spank someone. I don't know. I'm guessing. You tell me.
Well, I've growing up in a fairly physically abusive household, or two.
Marine, for sure, right?
Or two. Yeah. I would say that I'm not for. I believe you can get through to kids without physical abuse or physical disciplinary action.
Right.
So again, case in point, the punishment must fit the crime. If they're doing something that could get them killed, you have to physically prevent them from hurting themselves. That's different. But like here, and I don't share this with a lot of people, but my son, he is on the spectrum, and it's growing up, helping him grow up. And my wife, again, God love her, God bless her soul, she did 90% of it because of me with my job at the time and all that. So like she battled this, and for me, this is me being vulnerable. I mean, I avoided it like the plague, because to have a son that had those cognizant challenges to me was like, it made me feel inadequate as a man. It made me feel like a failure somehow, some way. And anyway, so that's another one of the reasons I probably, focused so hard on work, as I was avoiding the pain that it takes to really, I didn't know how to deal with that. But thank God for my wife that she figured it out, and that she had the fortitude to make it happen. And there were times, Velko, where she, 3 to 4 hours a night she would be grinding, and I would help when I'd come home from the dealership for the last 30 minutes of it. But the point is my wife would be grinding on him just to get him to do his homework, to get him to get through school. And and there were tempers would fly. Like she would be so frustrated at me because she's dealing with that at him, and then there'd be blame. We'd play this blame game of whose fault it was that we were going through all this. But what's crazy now is, like, my son is just this amazing person, and he's self-sufficient, and he's going to be fine. And is he different? Sure, but we all are, right? And people are like, would you change if you could make him totally normal? Would you? And my answer is no, because I love him for who he is now. And I didn't for so long, but it was because of my own fear and inadequacies and how I was worried about being viewed. That was selfish, and it cost me years of relationship with him at Velco, and I can never give that time back to him. But that being said, looking forward, right? I can't allow guilt to cause me to fail him as a father now, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
So I guess to answer your question is man, kids are learning, they're growing, right? You can't, just no different than the first time you or I tried to tie our shoes. We probably failed at it, and it took a lot of practice to get that bow tie right. So point is like, that's just how humans grow. We try things, we fail, and we mess up. And there's that they're life experiments, and we fail and we mess up and we learn from them. So why, I don't know, man, why cause physical harm to someone who's just going through the natural act of growth?
I know. Imagine if God was parenting like that. We sin and one in the ribs.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's fine. I have a brother who's an atheist, and he actually talks about how, and I'm like, the Bible and God is pure love. He's like, look at the Old Testament, the wrath, the vengeance, the burning of the cities, and
Well, that's the danger of reading the book from the beginning. That's the warning. I had that thing with my sister yesterday, but go ahead.
No, but I wanted to ask your opinion on that, man.
No, because my sister is reading the Bible now, and she's making the same mistake as I did, reading it from cover to cover. It's a wild experience when you do that. And she's like, "Why did God did this? Killing all these people." And I'm like, "Okay, imagine that your favorite neighbors, somebody just walks in their house and kills all of them brutally. He kills the little girl, kills the parents, and now they're outside, and you have a weapon. What would be justice? Would you kill that guy? Does he deserve to die? What is the message of Jesus?" Because people are blaming God for things that, if they are the judge in the same situation, they will do even worse, right? Does this guy deserve to die because he just killed those 3 people? Would you kill that person? And then if somebody just watches the perspective of you killing that person, would say, you're evil for killing that person, right? So we don't know the reason why God sent Joshua to kill the Chaldeans, but it was because they were living a life, they were perverts, they were unhumane, they were doing some nasty things. And here is God bringing justice, and we're blaming him for that. So that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. So Jesus comes, teaches us the lesson of grace, forgiving that person, because only if we forgive that person, he could potentially feel the love, feel the void, and then he could repent and change and stop killing others, right? How do we prevent that? By giving love proactively. And that's what Jesus is teaching us. And then I gave her the story about the prostitute that was on the beach, to teach her the lesson of grace. And everybody said, hey, if we follow the law of Moses, we're supposed to stone this whore. And he said, I don't condemn you either. He who never sinned, throw the first rock. Then he said, I don't condemn you either, but go on and sin no more. So repentance, forgiveness, grace is critical. But to have one-dimensional perspective is dangerous, because you would always blame God. You got to see the perspective from all angles. What made this person kill the neighbors? Maybe the neighbor's father killed his family in the past, and that's a simple revenge. So knowing all the perspectives, there's one movie, Crush, with Ludacris. Since we're gonna be mentioning movies with rappers, but that movie I think shows in the most practical way 17 different perspectives and how the ripple effect in each person works. And when we don't know all the facts, it's very easy to blame. And justice, it's a very weird thing. We think we're great sometimes, like, oh, I'm a great person, but we are somebody's monster, Sean. Like, we are 3 or 4 people out there are thinking this person ruined my life. Maybe you rightfully and justfully you fired somebody from the dealership, and you were like, I'm probably doing this guy a favor. He'll probably be better off at Burger King. And maybe this guy went into drug abuse and binge abuse, and it's dead now. And maybe I'm not trying to create fake guilt in you, but we don't know. Sometimes when we think we're doing good, we're doing bad, and sometimes when we think we're doing bad, we're doing good. It's different perceptions. It's not just our point of view.
Do you think that, assuming we get to go to heaven, let's say you go to heaven, we go to heaven, I go to heaven, whatever. Do you think when we get there, we get to learn all of the perspectives?
Yeah.
We do. Okay. I feel like that would be that would make sense, because then we get to see what we did right and what we did wrong, and see which things we think we did right that we didn't, and know why. I feel like that would be, but then I'm like, wait, isn't that only God's role to know all those things? So I struggle with that, and I've always wondered that. Do we get all the answers?
Once when the noise stops in a meditative state, which every religion says Jesus had the point of the highest state of consciousness. So when you're at the highest state of consciousness, you see all perspectives. It's all love. You have access to the limitless intelligence. And whether you agree or not, I'm going to share something really, really secret with you. I was able to do that with. Few years ago, I was struggling, and I went to do trip with ayahuasca. I don't know if you heard of that.
I have. Yeah, it's like some sort of like hallucination thing.
It's like a stick and a leaf, and they brew it together. It comes from Peru. And during that state, I was a little guilty. I felt guilty because I was like, I'm Jesus follower. I'm with Jesus. I can't be trying these secular things. And the people that do that, a lot of them believe in the universe and stuff like that. But Jesus was there the entire experience. He held my hand, and he was hosting the entire experience. He wanted me to know the truth, and he led me to God. And during that time, I experienced the limitless intelligence. I experienced the unlimited love, and I experienced the different perspectives. So this is something that I recommend to every human, because it healed 20 years of emotional trauma in one night. And the way it was healed is the people we blame for our situations, and the people we blame for the lowest moments in our life had it way worse. Like, thanks to this experience, I was able to fully forgive my dad. I blamed my dad, and then I saw him as a child. I saw, during that time of hallucination, or whatever you want to call it, I saw him going through his struggles, and I'm like, man, I wouldn't survive a day in his life. Who am I to judge him for what he did to me? Because he had way worse things happening to him. So he's a survivalist, and I'm a little spoiled boy for complaining about that, right? So you're able to see all the perspectives, the people that you've hurt. You're able to see the people you've hurt. Yeah.
No, this is crazy, man. Okay, so look, chapter number 10. Can you read that in the right there? Number 10.
Healing the whole person.
Yes. So it's interesting. So when I was on my near deathbed, and I was experiencing how you're describing that experience, it is almost exactly how I felt. And when I came back, I remember. So when I came back and I woke up, and I remember, like, God told me, your mother, it's time to forgive your mother, and it's time to help her find forgiveness. And then I was like, okay. And then so she came over to my house to visit me right after I was out of the hospital, right? So I'm laying in bed with oxygen. She shows up, and literally all of a sudden, like right then and there, she calls her roommate who she was living with, and her roommate's like, you can't come home now. Like, I've got family coming over. Now you've been around your son. You're exposed. You're gonna have to stay there. So to my wife's dismay, my mother stays with me for 5 days while I'm out of the hospital. And so that chapter is literally about how God helped me heal my mother, forgive my mother, and help and use faith and the word of God to help her fix her relationship with both my brothers and help my mom and her sister reunite. They hadn't talked in over a decade. And that 1 week I was able, like, because of experiencing God's love and going through that, it's just so interesting to me, the parallels between what that, whatever ayahuasca, whatever it was called, did to you and what almost dying did to me.
Well, look,
It's crazy.
we can all get to that state of mind, but we have to stop the noise. We have to, and that's so hard for us humans, to stop the noise, to stop the thoughts, to remove the mind. So we trade our mind for God's mind. And Jesus was able to do it because he was so focused on the Father. Buddha was able to get close. There's people and gurus out there that basically describe the same thing, and it's connecting with the divine, with the spiritual divine. So you were able to do it because you were unfortunate consequences led you to the point where the noise was gone. You didn't care about your business, you didn't care about what people say. You were right there just with God. And most people that have near death experience that unlimited intelligence. They get all the answers they need, and they come back to life with completely repurposed, regardless of how intelligent they are. I had a friend in Bulgaria who is not the sharpest guy, but he had a bike accident and he miraculously survived. And he was abusing alcohol before that. And then he just stopped drinking, became the most positive guy. And that was because of the near-death experience and what he experienced with God. And he was describing the same thing. I was able to get all the answers I wanted. They were right there. I didn't have to think. I didn't have to, and everything I wanted was there. And it's all love. And we're all shitheads. No one's better than the other. We're all wrong. We're all wrong. So we must forgive each other. And just because this person is a murderer and goes out and kills 2-3 people, somebody who's a banker might be killing 100 people. Somebody who's from big pharma might be killing 1,000 people. So there's no measurement of how many people we're killing and who's dying and who's alive, because this life is preparing us for eternity. If we believe that this is just a character building, understanding, realizing what the purpose of life period is, it's easier. So the ayahuasca is just a tool to shut down the noise. It's basically you're forcing the noise to stop. But we could get to that state if we quiet down for several minutes or several hours, in deep meditation, spending time with the Lord. We could get to that state of limitless intelligence and being able to see more than our perspective, being able to empathize and understand other people's pain. It's a powerful thing, but it rarely happens in conversations like that or while we're present in the world. It definitely happens with fasting and just being alone with the source.
I did a 3-day fast last month, man. It was definitely, I've never gone 3 days without eating. It was definitely brutal. You look great. You look trim and fit. Do you attribute some of that to fasting?
I attribute that. Fasting is a beautiful thing. I think that food is overrated, especially like as an immigrant. The first thing that shocked me when I came to America is how big the portions are. My cousin just went to France for a vacation, and he was like, "Oh, we're sitting down with the whole family," and they're like, "Yeah, we'll try these appetizers. We'll try this. I'm not sure between the chicken and steak, so I'll take both." And then the waiter was like, "How many people are we expecting? Is it just the 4 of you, or like is this a group of 20?" So he was like, everyone was fit. I was the fattest guy in the restaurant, and he's not fat by any means, but it's just, I think food is overrated. And Jesus fasted for 40 days. So it's not our only source of energy. Sexual drive is a source of energy, as you would learn from Think and Grow Rich. Purpose. There's so many sources of energy besides nutrition from food. So it's something that we need, but we're using it for entertainment. We're using it for emotional pain. We're using it for so many things. So I think fasting is good. I'm doing 100 hours every month, and I'm doing 16 hours every day. Yesterday I did 24 hours on accident. So I just skipped breakfast completely. Sometimes I skip lunch. And now I'm actually starting a new diet. So no breakfast, protein shake for lunch, and salad with fish or meat for dinner.
That's awesome, man.
But it's like a bank account. The the more calories you burn, the more money you deposit in your account. The more calories you take, the more money you're spending. So as long as you deposit more than you spend, you're going to be on the green side. So as long as you burn more than you consume, you're going to be on the green side. We don't move enough. We don't work out enough. That's and we have excuses for that. So what was your experience with the fast? Can you imagine Jesus went in the wilderness for 40 days?
Yeah, it's powerful, man. That part of the fast was for faith, part of it for health. But no, it got easier every day. That was the interesting thing. You would think that it would get harder every day. And I did 3 days back to back, so it was kind of like. But the first day was the toughest for me. I would have stomach's growling and I'm irritable. Second day, I felt a little bit, lightheaded and slightly woozy and a lot less hungry. And the third day, it was like I was in a different dimension,
Yeah.
visually, and it just felt different. It was all
On the fifth day is when you're cleaning the toxins from your brain and the bass from your voice disappears. So you start talking like this, and you're really the energy is gone, and that's when the body eats the bad protein that turns into cancer cells and all that. So literally, if I ever get some of these diseases, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on a dry fast until the disease is gone. It's something that people have been practicing for thousands of years, that we're taking for granted. We're like, oh, if you don't have your 3 meals a day, it's dangerous. No, BS. Give break to the internal organs. Tell me about the 6-month alcohol fast. Why would you stop drinking? I don't drink
just because
at all.
I guess I'm self-aware enough to know when I'm overindulging in something, and I felt like alcohol was becoming more of a habit than I would have preferred it to be. And so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't unhealthy. It wasn't reaching an unhealthy level. And I actually was trying to up my life insurance, and I failed the test because they did my medical background check and they saw almost dying of COVID and stuff like that. So, that was kind of like an eye opener. Like, man, I can't up my life insurance for my family. So as a result, I decided to just, I'm just going to do some extra. I'm going to go above and beyond to be extra healthy this year. So that way I can take another swing at that in the future. And so I'm like, I'm going to quit drinking for 6 months. I'm going to do some, food fasts. And that's really what I did. And I will say that there was a definite quitting drinking. It's not like I was drinking every day, but almost every weekend I'd have a few beers, and then maybe once a month I would probably drink more than one person should in one sitting, and it'd get a buzz on. But point is I will tell you that quitting drinking, there was a lot of I felt my mind was clear. I'm a positive. I project positivity regardless of what I feel inside, right? But point is inside I felt positive. My moods, it was less like up and down roller coaster. It felt much more even, but much more positive too. So quitting drinking, there was noticeable changes in how I felt. And going back to it, the best part is now my tolerance is much less again. I can drink one and I'm good. And I don't, and truly, I just don't feel the urge to drink one anymore. I'm doing it by choice as opposed to like I'm getting the itch to have a beer. Whereas before I was kind of getting the itch to have a beer. So that's definitely changed.
The more I study alcohol, the less benefits I see, and if we use the terms when you do too much and you get to the hospital or you get arrested, they say this person is intoxicated. So it's voluntarily putting toxins in our body that have zero benefits. I did a big study on depression not too long ago, and alcohol is literally the greatest tool for depression. Like if the devil wants to come up with a chemical that would lead people to depression, that's alcohol by far. There's nothing that comes even close that could maintain, spark, or lead to deeper depression. Basically, what the expert said, if you are depressed and you're drinking alcohol, there is no hope of changing your brain. So obviously, I don't want to shame people, guilt people, or people are free to do whatever they want and put whatever they want in their body. It's a personal choice, but I choose. And I love, sometimes I play soccer and boys drink beer after that. And it's just the best time. It's hot. Beer just I want to taste it. And wine, sometimes it's very delicious with food and good wine. It gives you that sense of freedom, and I think it gives you a full sense of pride too, like makes you brave. Jordan Peterson has done a lot of studying on alcohol too. He has some great facts on it, but I just don't see any benefits. If I can have a genuine experience of joy, and if I could be addicted or not addicted, but if I could follow the natural sources of dopamine, I would much rather do that, because I think it's like an external tool. And alcohol, anything that really controls us, it's not good for us. Anything that becomes an idol and you become powerless to it, it's really not good for us. I can actually share some of the things that I found out are real dopamine, like a natural dopamine without side effects. Experiencing new things is one of those things. Love the people around you. Like if you have an exercise, Zig Ziglar back in the day had this exercise. Imagine that all of your loved ones are dead, and now go check on them. And if they're alive, tell them you love them. So I've been doing that since I was like 18.
That's cool.
Uh,
I'm gonna use that for sure.
Eat nourishing food. Sometimes it's the food that kills the dopamine, but if you eat nourishing food, if it's delicious, if it's good for you, it actually creates natural dopamine. Living in the moment, making impulsive decisions that make you feel alive. If we're dying, I have I play this exercise with me often, that I'm dead, and what would I miss from this world? And it's usually moments where I was braver than I was supposed to, where I took a risk and I felt alive and I jumped. And those are the moments we're going to cherish on our deathbed. And living in the moment is a big source of dopamine. Focusing on your passion, when you're in the zone, doing something that you truly love, everything stops, the world stops. Giving back, giving something to someone that you received once from another person, like the pass it on thing, fills us with dopamine. Being able to give something to someone who could never pay you back, it's such an amazing privilege and gift. Listening to music, it's just music does something with the wave, and puts us in the right state. Tony Robbins uses music to change people's state, to prove how critical music is and changes people's state. Spending time with in sunshine, just a natural source of vitamin D. Wanting to grow and evolve, it's just an experience that it's undescribable. Like something, chemicals happen, juices in the body start moving. But when you want to grow, evolve, be a better version of you, there's unlimited energy that comes in. That's called dopamine. Wanting, making a difference where you can. When hey, if I didn't go and do this, people would be different. When you leave people better than when you found them, it's a great feeling of accomplishment. Good sleep is so critical, and we've learned from so many gurus that sleep is overrated, and Arnold saying sleep 5 hours and 6 hours, and Grant Cardone saying don't sleep 3 hours, blah blah blah. But sleeping is a natural, like Sun Tzu I think said, it's number one law, right? Hey, outsleep the enemy or something like that, right? That our secret weapon is we sleep. Move your body and quiet your mind and meditate. And the deeper your meditation is, the closer you get to the limitless intelligence and the full perspective. Sorry for taking so much of the time, but I wanted to share those with you because we got here.
That's awesome.
So
agree
yeah,
all
I choose all these things instead of alcohol or weed or other things that take the edge off.
Those are all really good, powerful tools for being healthier. By the way, there's you were making me think of this one book called, check it out if you guys, Tools of Titans. The book's called Tools of Titans. It's literally the author interviews all the healthy, wealthy, and wise people he can. The whole book is, and he asks a bunch of zany questions, but basically it's like, how did they become super wealthy or super healthy or whatever? He's interviewing Olympic athletes, and that a lot of those tools you shared were tools that the most healthy, wealthy, and wise people on the planet use.
Yeah. And the other tools, the artificial love, they're just a shortcut. It's a shortcut. Sometimes it's necessary. When you're in really deep, deep, deep trouble and you have no control, sometimes some of those tools are necessary for the initial stage, kind of like a medicate, kind of like morphine is good when you're dying, but it's not good to do it every day, but it saved your life. So when people say, what about depression and all the medications, I'm against the medications for depression. I think that they make people vegetables for the rest of their life. But when somebody is in crisis, one pill that saves their life, that gets them back into breathing mode, could be helpful. So a lot of those tools have a little bit of positive, like a 1% positive, but they're not a long-term solution. All these things are long-term solution, and they have no side effects. I'm so glad you're alive, Sean, and you can share your
Thank you,
passion
brother.
with life and God and people with the world, and continue to coach car business and coach everybody else.
Love you, man. It
Tell
means a
us,
lot. Man, I love what you mentioned earlier about being in the moment. So I would close by just, giving you that one piece of advice is that if you're fearful, anxious, and worried, then you're probably living in the future, right? In your head. And if you are feeling guilty, ashamed, and depressed, you're probably living in the past. What about right now? And what Velko said earlier about living in the moment is one of the most powerful tools we have to stay healthy. I would totally agree with that. So I challenge everyone listening to this to just be present where you're at with the people that you're with.
thank you so much for this. Make it
My
a great
pleasure.
day.